Hello, friends and beautiful people. It is Kathryn and conscious creatrix, elevated consciousness coach, and 5D visionary. Hello, and welcome to this week's weekly energy check-in for the week of September 15th, 2019. We're going to get into this week's weekly energy check-in in just a sec. First off, if you like talks on all things ascension and ascended consciousness and spiritual awakening, you're going to want to hit the subscribe button, the lower left or the right hand corner, I should say, of this screen, and subscribe to this channel and get lots more content like this. And the weekly energy check-in comes out every Sunday, and it's where I put my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the cosmos and give you a snapshot of what is happening right here down on Mothership Earth and how it's affecting your life in real, tangible, and practical ways, and what you can do to shift into an upgraded way of being, or shift out of, or release, or resolve an old way of being that's just not serving you anymore. So let's get into this week's weekly energy check-in. So if you have been watching me over the past few weeks, you know that I've been talking about this major timeline jump, this major timeline split that is happening between 3D and 5D timelines. In the quick and dirty way of explaining that, the 3D timeline we have found ourselves in for a great deal of time has kept us in ego separation, ego illusion. We've had a very dense and heavy way of vibrating, of being in a frequency of lack, being in a frequency of want, being in a frequency of feeling like we are separated from the higher divine self, who we truly are. This is all an illusion, and we've had many timelines that support that have collapsed, leaving us feeling like we can see these patterns, these things coming to the surface that have been holding us down, that have been keeping us in lack, keeping us in want. It's all coming up in stark relief, in stark contrast now with these collapsing timelines that are ensuring this jump to 5D. However, we are humans with free will choice. We can choose to stay in the illusion. We can choose to pretend to not know what's really going on and what's keeping us in these feelings of lack or want. We can choose to stay in our trauma. We can choose to stay in our desperation and our illusion. We can choose to stay in ego and let that run the show or drive the bus. However, the 5D way of being is all about self-expansion. It's all about knowing that we are frequency holders. We are holding a vibration. Everything in the universe is frequency and vibration. We are moving into this place of profound realization that we can choose a different way of being. We can literally choose to be at a different frequency. We can choose to be at a higher vibration, which will take our lives forward in very, very different ways that are not reminiscent of our past. This is where our higher self, the universe, me, we're all inviting you to make a different, better, self-affirming choice. A series of those choices that kind of builds momentum and allows you to jump into that higher 5D timeline for yourself. We are really coming out of this third density perspective of being stuck in the third dimension and feeling like we don't have a choice, that we're resigned to a certain fate, feeling indifferent to the fullness of life, saying this is just the way it is, this is just the way I am. All of this stuff this week is really compounding for you, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment and how that is feeling and what it's going to look like for you. So everything that's part of the more dense vibration of 3D it's collapsing and it's crumbling if we allow that. And the reason why we feel so much emotional turmoil, emotional upheaval, especially now as we are approaching really this major rift that's putting up such a contrast between 3D and 5D ways of being, we are really being kind of pushed into a corner, and the universe is saying, the higher self is saying, I'm saying, make a choice. Make a choice that is self-affirming, or you have free will choice. Make a choice that is keeping you in that old way of being, but get ready to hit the reset button and literally hit repeat on an old way of being, cycling through the old looped behaviors, looped thoughts, looped feelings that have kept you in a diminished, discounted state of being over the last 2, 3, maybe even 4 decades. That's what you're saying yes to. If you decide to not make different choices, if you decide to not opt into a higher frequency way of being with the thoughts and the feelings that form your inner technology and create your frequency, create your vibration. So I want to talk about what's really compounding and coming to this major pivot point for us this week. And that is that it's really time to ask yourself, if you are sure that you want to make higher frequency, better, more self-affirming thoughts or actions, behaviors for yourself, you're going to want to ask yourself right now, what am I getting out of this? What's the payoff of hanging on to where I feel blocked? What's the payoff of hanging on to where I feel this barrier, where I've hit this wall, this loop of self-limitation that I'm in? Because if we are staying in this self-limiting, self-negating way of being, there's usually a reason why we're doing it. And so on a subconscious level, if we're not checked into it, there's some sort of payoff for us on an unconscious, unchecked, subconscious level. Sometimes we are defining ourselves by this block and all the behaviors, thoughts, and feelings that support this way of being. Sometimes we find a sense of, let's just say, perverse security in staying in this way because it's familiar, it's just known to us, and we know on a deeper level, on our deep soul level, that this is negating our whole way of being and keeping us from the fullness of life. But it's so familiar and comfortable for us, it's almost like a security blanket. Sometimes we've created so many behaviors in our lives around the original trauma that happened that made you be this way, or allowed you to think that you had to be this way, that you were resigned to this fate. Sometimes we've created so many behaviors in our lives around that original trauma that those behaviors have allowed us to create an identity around it. So we literally say, I am me, and it could be, I am poor, I am broken, I am unlovable, and it becomes a story we tell ourselves, and our story as humans of who we are is everything, and we define ourselves by it, we identify with it. But have you noticed lately, as we are coming to this major timeline split that's happening on September 19th, literally 4 days from the date I'm making this video, you may have noticed lately that that block, that barrier, that trauma feels way more intense. That trauma keeps cropping up, and it feels like it has taken on almost a physicality, like a bully, almost like a person coming up to you and poking you in the arm and saying, hey, remember me, remember me, remember me? Yeah, exactly. That's how it can feel for many of us. And that's because we are at this breaking point. We're at this major pivot point where this major timeline split between 3D, which is self-illusion, and 5D, which is self-expansion. These realities split and they part ways. And it creates an even bigger rift. So it feels like now these splits, or I should say the split that's happening between 3D and 5D, it's really close. And it's ready to split. But once that rift is made and that chasm through our illusion of 3D time will get bigger and bigger as the days, the weeks, the months, the years go by, and it may be harder for us. It's not that we don't ever have the choice to choose that higher timeline for ourselves by making better, more self-affirming choices, but it gets harder to do when we have these major timeline splits that literally cause a rift in dimensions. It causes a major rift in our levels of consciousness. So as this rift gets bigger, this chasm goes wider, this gap gets more massive in between the two realities and between the two dimensional realities. It becomes harder for us to make those self-affirming choices. That's why all of this stuff is coming up for your review now. That's why all of this stuff that you don't want to look at, that you've been pretending not to know, is rising to the surface now. And it's almost like if you're a coffee drinker and if you put half and half in your coffee and you realize the half and half has spoiled, you'll get those little nuggets of cream that rise to the top of the coffee cup. That's exactly what's happening in our mental, emotional fields right now. So Stop pretending not to see it. Stop pretending not to know it. Take a look at it. Examine it. Discover what is there. What's the deeper message? Dig a little deeper than just seeing those clots of cream on top of the coffee and saying, okay, what's underneath there? Where has this sediment fallen out and created other things in my life that I need to clear or release or resolve? So as this timeline splits, okay, and we're really feeling this now, this is really intense. That's why all this stuff is coming up to the surface that you're like, ugh. And then the full moon in Pisces we just experienced, is helping. You may think it's not helping, and that it's creating more emotional turmoil and emotional baggage for you to sift through, but it's like I always say, it's the gift in the garbage. It feels like your life is being turned around, you're inside a washing machine and you're getting tumbled all over the place. But is that gift in that garbage, that cosmic gift of bringing everything to the surface so that you can finally examine what's going on, say, admit, declare what it is, and then move and release that energy out and be done with it. Mark that karmic lesson. Download it and complete. This can only be done with your full and active participation, your intention, and your free will choice to have it be so. The universe can't do that for you. All they can do is provide all of the resources to bring all of this to your attention. What you decide to do with it, what you decide to focus on, is entirely your free will choice to do. Okay? But as this timeline splits, talking about the next 4 days here, and this energy is going to feel intense for the next 4 days while this split is starting to take hold, while it's starting to really manifest. The rift between the two will be causing a much greater contrast in your life. It's happening right now. You're seeing it right now. Your higher self is asking you. It's asking you to make a choice for the better, to release the trauma that is holding you back from the fullness of life. And I want to talk about trauma for a second. Though most recognizable in its fiercest forms, right, of abuse, neglect, deeply scarring emotional or physical injury, it can actually take on many, many different forms, and it has a spectrum. This includes indifference. Indifference felt from others and internalized. Indifference felt towards your own needs and your own desires, which is basically self-abandonment. Indifference towards life in general. I define trauma as anything unreleased or unresolved in the body and the mind that compounds over time and creates a prolonged self-limiting way of being. So when you look at trauma in the bubble of that definition, you can start to understand trauma as like a spectrum. And indifference is definitely on the other end of that spectrum of severe abuse or physical, emotional injury or harm done. Indifference has a compounding effect. It numbs you. So wherever you've coped and you've hoped and you've tolerated and you've put up with endless amounts of bullshit because of it, from yourself, from other people, you've said to yourself, well, this is just who I am. This is just how it is. You created behaviors to try to offset it. You made it your normal. It cannot be your normal, however, if you really want to do the things in life that you said you want to do. It can't be your normal if you have bigger dreams, hold a higher ideal, if you want to step into a higher expression of who you are. These two energies, indifference and creating something profoundly different from where you are very mutually exclusive energies. Quite frankly, you're coming into this place of realization now. And many of you are feeling it. I know many of you, as you're listening to this, you're hearing, that kind of resonate in your belly, and you're feeling butterflies in your belly, and you're feeling that energy come into your heart, and you're feeling maybe a little block in the throat. This is normal. This is normal because you're hearing truth about where you've been abandoning yourself, where you've given away parts of yourself, where you've fragmented, disassociated, and there is a big call from the universe now and a call from your higher divine self to bring it all back in, to bring in those fragmented, disassociated parts of self, wash them clean in God's light, and bring them back home. That's why you're feeling this in the body. That's why we can't ever separate the emotional and the physical state, because they are one and the same, and they inform each other like an endless infinity loop of information, back and forth, back and forth. So you're coming into this place of realization. You're realizing that you actually have some pretty big dreams about your life. Yes? They may feel like full-on fantasies sometimes, but what they are actually glimpses of possibility. They're snapshots that you're allowing yourself to see of your own potential. And we are deep into uncharted territory of new possibilities for our lives going forward. With your ego, your imagination tethered to a 3D dimensional consciousness, you cannot even literally imagine what is possible for you, because you are still stuck in a lower vibration dimensional reality. But you can opt out of this at any time you wish. So let me ask you, do you really think that you will create the masterpiece of your life and tap into your unlimited, yes, unlimited potential for making it happen from a place of indifference, from a place of lack, from a place of want, from a place of feeling constantly unworthy or unlovable, from only seeing the dullness of life? I'll give you one guess at what the answer is. It's time to make a choice. Release and resolve your trauma, whatever form that may take, and say a resounding yes to self-expansion. This is your call to action from the universe this week. This is my invitation to you this week, especially within the next 4 or 5 days. What can you clean up? What can you declutter in your emotional field, in your mental field, in your physical body? Maybe you want to embark on a fast, a mini fast over the next few days. Maybe you want to drink a lot more water and purge the body. Maybe you want to take an Epsom salt bath or do Epsom salt foot baths to pull toxins out of the body, because that can help you have an emotional purging and emotional discharge as well. That can really help you and bring those other things to the surface that you are blocking yourself from seeing. Okay? This is the time, my friends, to make some concrete decisions. Do you want to stay in that 3D self-negating, self-illusion, very dense reality and way of being that is self-limiting? Or do you want to opt for just even being able to imagine and being in the vibrational space, being vibrationally available to imagine something greater that is not reminiscent of your past experience at all, that's something completely new? Outcomes that are completely unpredictable yet delightful? Wouldn't you rather open yourself up to that? And doesn't that energy lend itself to this masterpiece of life that, if you're honest with yourself, you know you have the ability to create? So with that, my friends, I know that's a lot to take in, but I say this message to you with so much love and peace and compassion in my heart. And I am sending that all to you while you're on this journey. Believe me, I know how difficult that can be for you. I know how this way of being has veiled possibilities and potential ways of being to you. But that time is no more. But it has to be a decision, a free will choice on your part to have that be so. Love and peace.